I'm Connor, and my wife is Chloe. We met at university and got married not long after we graduated. Our lives followed the typical path: house, kids, mortgage. Chloe stayed home to raise our kids until they were grown, and then she returned to her job in real estate. She's always been a good. I wouldn't be surprised if Chloe got teased at work from time to time. From what I know, though, she's always stayed faithful to me. Chloe has a playful, sometimes cheeky sense of humor, which may have caused a few bumps along the way, but nothing too serious. We have 2 kids. Our son Liam is 21, and he's working as an electrician after finishing vocational school. He's got his own place nearby. Our daughter Lucia is 19 and currently attending a state university about 150 miles away. With both kids out of the house, we were looking forward to a peaceful retirement, some travel, and maybe grandchildren down the line. In the early years, our relationship, especially in bed, was pretty normal. We were pretty active almost every night and on weekends, but as time went on, it slowed down to a few times a week, which was fine for me. Chloe seemed to lose interest over time. I knew how to make her happy, but something always seemed to get in the way. About 5 years ago, things started to change when a new couple moved in next door. Their names were Doug and Tiffany, and we hit it off pretty quickly. The problem was Doug's love for practical jokes. He played them on her. She was happy, and she knew how to push all the right buttons. But something always seemed to get in the way. About 5 years ago, things started to change when a new couple moved in next door. Their names were Doug and Tiffany, and we hit it off pretty quickly. The problem was that Doug loved practical jokes. He played them on people. I often found myself the target of Doug's pranks, which I found annoying. I tried to let Chloe know how much it bothered me, even going along with the jokes now and then, but she didn't seem to care. Over time, I began to notice something else. Doug seemed a little too interested in Chloe. His jokes with her often crossed the line, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted more than just friendship. Whenever we hung out together, Chloe and Doug would laugh at his sometimes crude jokes, leaving Tiffany and I just smiled awkwardly. I could tell Tiffany was as uncomfortable as I was. One particular day at the beach still sticks with me. Doug started making fun of some tourists walking by, and Chloe jumped right in, laughing along with him. Tiffany and I were both shocked by how reckless they were. No matter what we said, they just kept laughing together. That's when I knew things were getting out of hand. Another time, we were at Doug and Tiffany's place for a barbecue. Tiffany and I were outside chatting, while Chloe went inside with Doug to grab drinks. After a while, we realized they'd been gone. We'd been waiting longer than expected, so we went inside to look for them. When we walked into the house, there they were, coming out of the living room, arms around each other and laughing like teenagers. Doug had lipstick smudges on his collar and around his mouth, while Chloe's lipstick was smeared and her hair was a mess. Tiffany and I just stood there, completely dumbfounded. "Hey, sorry about the wait," Doug said, acting like nothing was wrong. Chloe was just helping me show her some of my artwork. He was grinning, completely oblivious to how they looked. Chloe tried to keep a straight face and said, "Oh, Doug's got some amazing prints. Tiffany, you've got to see them." That was the moment I finally snapped. "What the hell is going on here?" I asked Chloe why Doug has lipstick all over him and you look like you've just been kissing him. Chloe tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Connor. We were just looking at his artwork. I guess I got a little too into it. You're not mad, are you?" Doug had that same smirk he always wore when he was about to pull one of his pranks. Chloe was avoiding contact, struggling to keep from laughing. I was furious. Tiffany, still confused, finally spoke up. "Doug, if you think this is funny, you've got another thing. You're not going to mess around with another woman in our house." Both Doug and Chloe burst out laughing at that point, and I could see Tiffany starting to realize what was going on. "Oh, lighten up. It's just a prank. If you could have seen the looks on your faces, you'd be laughing. Come on, let's get a drink and laugh this off," said Doug, trying to lighten the mood. Reluctantly, Tiffany and I followed them into the kitchen, still in disbelief. "One day they're going to take this too far and it's not going to end well," I muttered to Tiffany, who nodded in agreement. Chloe could sense my frustration. "I'm sorry, babe," she said. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. We were just messing around, and nothing serious happened. We didn't think you and Tiffany would be upset. Are you still mad?" "I'm trying not to be, but you've got to stop getting," Chloe said. "You know how important loyalty is to me. Seeing you like that, it almost gave me a heart attack." "I get it." "Connor," she said softly, I would never do anything to hurt you. I value loyalty just as much as you do. Please believe that. She leaned in and kissed me a couple of times. A few weeks later, Chloe and I were back at Doug and Tiffany's house for dinner on a Saturday night. We'd just finished eating when there was a call that Doug initially thought was for Tiffany. She works as an ER nurse at the local hospital. After hanging up, Doug turned to her and said, "It's the ER. There's been a bad car wreck, and they need you there as soon as possible. Let me go change and head out," she replied. 10 minutes later, Tiffany was on her way to the hospital. Once she'd left, Doug turned to me and asked, "Hey, could you give me a hand with a project I've got going in the basement?" I noticed Chloe staying quiet. I was avoiding contact, but at the time I didn't think much of it. I stood up to join him downstairs. "I just need you to hold something while I attach it to the ceiling. It's not too heavy, but I can't hold it and attach it at the same time. Tiffany's too short for this kind of thing." "It sounds simple enough," I said. "Trust me. It'll only take a minute," Doug assured me as we headed down the stairs. When we got to the basement, he pointed me toward a metal support post near the furnace. He grabbed a small metal box with a power cord hanging from it off his workbench and lifted it up toward the ceiling between the post and the furnace is where I noticed Chloe had followed us downstairs, watching with a strange smile on her face. I didn't think much of it at the time. "Hold this for me while I attach it," Doug instructed. "What's this for?" I asked as I reached up to grab the box. He said he'd explain in a sec, so I let him grab his tools. He disappeared behind his desk, leaving me holding the box up against the ceiling. My hands were wrapped around the pipe to press it in place. Moments later, I heard 2 quick clicks and I was handcuffed to the pipe. "What the hell?" "Doug!" I shouted, realizing I'd been tricked. I turned to see Doug slipping his arm around Chloe's waist as they both stood there grinning at me. "What's going on?" "Get these damn cuffs off me," I demanded. "Sorry, buddy," Doug said with a smirk. "Chloe's quite fond of my art and she wants another look without you." Or, Tiffany was in the way this time as he said that they started heading upstairs together. Chloe was swaying her hips as they left. "You'll regret this, Doug," I told him. "Let me loose now," I shouted after them. "Relax, Connor. I'm just going to admire some engravings," Chloe called back with a chuckle, leaving me alone. In the basement, I was struggling with the handcuffs. The pipe was anchored into the concrete floor and bolted to a steel beam overhead, making it impossible to escape. My mind was racing, and I could hear them moving into the bedroom above me. Then I heard Chloe giggling. I heard footsteps on the carpet and whispers of urgency, which made me feel really angry. "Doug, I want you so badly," I heard Chloe say, her voice filled with lust. After what felt like an eternity, silence fell upstairs. I was spent, slumping against the concrete and still wrapped around the pipe. Tears welled up in my eyes as Chloe's voice rang out. "That was amazing, Doug. I'll definitely need. We should go and check on Connor and Tiffany. I'm sure they'll be back soon from that fake call I made, so let's not risk her catching us." I heard footsteps on the stairs, but I didn't bother to look up. Chloe's voice broke the silence. "Oh my God, look at his wrists. Connor, I'm so sorry, it was just a joke. Doug, please unlock him and get out of here. As soon as I'm free, you're going to regret ever being born." I growled. Locking, he looked at me, but didn't say anything. Doug gave Chloe the key and ran for the stairs. I could see fear in his eyes as soon as Chloe unlocked the cuffs. I heard Doug's truck start up and heard the tires screeching as he drove away slowly. I stood up and looked down at Chloe, who was still crouched on the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Chloe, you better find somewhere else to stay tonight. I swear I'll hurt you if you come back here. Call before you even think of coming back. Connor, I'm sorry, it was just a joke. We didn't do anything. I'm concerned you might as well have cheated. From now on, that's exactly how I'll treat it." I said coldly, "Expect a call from my lawyer. We're done. No, Connor, please. Nothing happened." She cried out from the basement as I turned to leave. I didn't respond, just as I reached my car. Tiffany's headlights lit up the driveway as she pulled in. She rushed out, her face frantic. "Where's that worthless husband of mine?" she asked. "There was no accident." She said she needed an ambulance, then saw my wrists. "Oh my God, Connor, what happened? Let me help you." I sighed, but this time they went too far. "I'm divorcing Chloe," Tiffany said, her voice full of distress. "You'll hear all about it from Chloe and Doug." I said, "I'm heading home to take care of my wrists. Once you're done, you can tell my cheating ex-wife that her belongings are on the porch. If she wants back in, she's going to need a court order. Oh God, what did they do? Tiffany wailed as she rushed inside, clearly upset. I climbed into my car, still angry, and headed home. Once there, I cleansed my wrists with antibacterial soap, applied some ointment, and bandaged them. I methodically packed up Chloe's belongings. I tossed them into plastic bags and set them outside, ignoring the phone's constant ringing. I kept my focus on the task at hand. After locking up the house, I undressed and lay on the bed, but sleep wouldn't come, even though I was exhausted. The phone rang again in the morning, but I wasn't in the mood to answer it. I showered, ate breakfast, and changed my bandages around 10. The doorbell rang. Looking out, I saw Tiffany standing on the doorstep. I invited her in and gestured for her to sit. They really went too far this time, didn't they? She said as she stepped inside. Unfortunately, yes, I replied. So what's your plan? She asked. I'm filing for divorce, I said. They claim nothing happened. They say it was just another one of their jokes, but to me it's done. I said, you seem pretty upset. Could you take a moment to calm down and think about your decision? You've been together for almost 24 years. Don't you want to try and save it? She asked, clearly hoping for a different outcome. I won't tolerate being betrayed. I've been betrayed by Chloe more than once. In my eyes, she betrayed me. It's over, but they insist. Nothing actually happened. They just made it look like something did. Tiffany countered, that doesn't matter. I felt like it could have happened. And as far as I'm concerned, that's reality. They can't prove it didn't happen, and I have to trust my own perception. She showed no respect for me. I said firmly, can't you at least hold off and try counseling? Chloe is devastated. Tiffany pleaded. I've warned her before, but she didn't listen. Now it's too late. The lawyer will handle it from here. If you're okay with Doug's involvement, that's your choice. But he better stay far away from me. I haven't decided what to do about Doug yet, but I hate that this has come between us. Doug feels terrible and wanted me to pass along sincere apologies to you. She said, her voice was quiet. I think you should tell Doug that our friendship is over. As for you, Tiffany, I think it's best if we don't see each other as long as you're still with him. I said, is there anything I can tell Chloe that might give her hope for your forgiveness? Tiffany asked if she can prove she didn't sleep with Doug. I'll consider it, but I don't trust either of them to tell the truth. So she'll need to do more than talk. She can take a lie detector test if she really wants to prove it. I said, okay, Connor. I'll let her know. Tiffany said, her voice filled with sadness. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. Across town, she's a widow, so she has space for Chloe. Maybe for good, after loading Chloe's belongings into Tiffany's car. I waved her off and went back inside. The first thing I did was call a locksmith to change the locks. I didn't want to come home from work on Monday and find myself locked out. Once the locksmith confirmed they'd come by that day, I unplugged the phone and I switched off my cell and spent the day doing household chores until the locksmith arrived. After they left, I drove to the supermarket and stocked up on frozen dinners, enough to last me about a week. When I returned to my now solitary home, I couldn't shake the overwhelming absence of Chloe after almost 24 years together. I still felt angry towards her and Doug, but it was starting to subside around 7. That evening at 7:30, I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw Chloe's sister Sylvia standing at the doorstep. Hello, Sylvia, I said as I opened the door. Come on in. I welcomed her inside and led her to the living room. Do you want something to drink? I asked. A Coke would be fine. She said a cola would be fine, so I fetched the drinks and sat back down. She began after taking a sip. I suppose you know why I'm here. Yes, I imagine you're here to plead for Chloe's return. If that's the case, you've come in vain. No, not exactly, Sylvia responded. I told you everything. How are your wrists? They're healing up nicely, no signs of infection. I told her that Chloe will be relieved to hear that. Sylvia said she's on the verge of a breakdown, especially since you refused to speak to her. That's why I'm here to deliver a few messages from her. I'll listen, but I can't promise anything in return. First, she wants you to know that she loves you deeply and regrets what she did. Anything else I asked, she's willing to take a lie detector test to prove nothing happened with Doug or anyone else. It's the only proof she feels she can offer. Sylvia said she hadn't considered this option before. I thought about it for a moment. I'll think about it, but I have a few conditions. First, just proving she didn't sleep with Doug doesn't guarantee reconciliation. Second, Doug needs to take the same test with matching results. Third, I need to approve the questions. And lastly, I'm not paying for the tests. I explained that seems fair. Connor, the test results might change your mind though, Sylvia said. Maybe, but the hurt she caused will take a long time to heal, even if the tests prove she's telling the truth. I replied. I understand, Connor. I'll convey your terms to her, Sylvia said, standing to leave. I'm sorry, truly, I was angry with her when she came by earlier, but she looked so upset that I couldn't stay angry. She knows how much pain she's caused. Thanks for coming by, Sylvia. I thought about the situation some more. I was less angry, but I still wasn't sure if I wanted to reconcile. I poured myself a glass of scotch and wandered through the house, thinking about our life together. Did I really want to end it all just then? The doorbell rang again. Looking outside, I saw our daughter Lucia standing on the front step, looking unhappy. I opened the door and she marched inside, glaring at me. What's going on with the locks, Dad? Why haven't you been answering your calls? I had to drive 150 miles to get some answers. I'm sorry, Lucia. I wasn't trying to avoid you. I heard from Aunt Sylvia that your mother told you what happened, I explained. Yeah, and I'm really upset that you kicked your mom out just because of a joke. Can't you forgive her? Did she tell you how I've warned her time and time again about those pranks? I cautioned her, Lucia. But she didn't listen. I didn't get much from Mum over the phone, but it sounded like it was just a joke. How bad could it have been? I rolled up my sleeves and showed Lucia. The scars on my wrists show how serious this was, Lucia. It might have been just a prank to her, but I believe they went through with it. Daddy, that's terrible. Is that when you asked her to leave? She asked with a voice full of concern. Yes, it sounded just like they described. Either your mom and Doug are great actors, or it was. I suggested a lie detector test, but I still feel betrayed. I said, I'm sorry, Dad. I hope you and Mom can work through this. I love you both, no matter what. She replied softly, I miss your mom too, but I'm struggling with her lack of respect. I said, I understand now. I'm going to see my mom and try to calm her down. I'll stay with my Aunt Sylvia tonight, but I have to head back to school tomorrow. Please turn your phone on so I can reach you. Liam wants to talk to you too. He's working upstate and tried calling. I'll turn the phones back on once you're gone. Lucia gave me a hug. She looked just like her mother, which was comforting but also a bit unsettling. Bye-bye, Daddy, she said, opening her car door. I waved as she drove off. Then I went back inside, feeling the weight of everything on my shoulders. I grabbed the glass of scotch I'd poured earlier and finished it before turning my phones back on. A couple of days after Sylvia's visit, she called to say that Chloe had agreed to my terms for the lie detector test. She also said that Doug had agreed to take the test, and had even offered to cover the cost as a way of showing remorse for his involvement in the prank. Sylvia gave me the contact details. I also gave the testing administrator some information, but I was less angry at Chloe now. I was still sad, though. If she really loved me and hadn't been physically involved with Doug, why would she do such a cruel thing? I started to think that maybe Chloe's love for me had faded over time. Despite her claims that she wanted to reconcile, I wasn't sure I could stay in a marriage where the love had vanished. Chloe tried to call me multiple times, but each time I heard her voice, I hung up instead. Sylvia acted as a go-between, relaying Chloe's apologies and her desire to make things right. I stayed firm, refusing to make any decisions until the test results came back. During this time, my son Liam reached out, urging me to forgive his mother and let her come home. He didn't seem to grasp the depth of the pain or actions she had caused, no matter how much I explained. He kept pleading with me to take her back. I started to realize that our relationship going ahead with the divorce might put a strain on my relationship with Lucia. She's been really supportive and empathetic, which has been a huge help. After Sylvia gave me the contact details for the test administrator, I decided to reach out to a few people I trust. I also got advice from people I trust in law enforcement and legal circles. They reassured me, and I felt confident enough to schedule an appointment with the test administrator, Tom McCormick, to ensure the process would be impartial. The next day, I found out that Chloe and Doug had already contacted Tom and scheduled their lie detector tests for 2 days later. I was named an interested party, which meant I could decide which questions were asked. I told my boss I needed some time off and went to see Tom McCormick. We talked about the questions that would show if Chloe and Doug had done anything wrong. Tom said he would ask the same questions of both of them. If both tests aligned and showed no deception, I'd have to consider whether to trust Chloe again. However, if the tests showed any lying, I knew divorce was inevitable. I felt a bit more at ease knowing I'd soon have clarity, but I also knew that even if the tests cleared them, I still had some tough choices to make over the next few days. I stuck to my usual routine at work, staying late to avoid going back to an empty house. I had dinner at the local diner and then a glass of whiskey at home. I was really struggling to sleep, though. I missed Chloe's warmth and presence in bed. The morning of the test arrived, and I was hoping the lie detector would clear things up, but I still felt uncertain. If the test confirmed Chloe's story, she might return, but I'd need her to promise that this kind of behavior would never happen again. She'd seen how deeply her actions had hurt me. That sense of quiet was shattered when the phone rang just after 11. 000 Connor. It's Tiffany. I found something about Doug. He's at the testing center now. Can you come over? I heard her voice, filled with tension, and I rushed next door following our usual routine. I entered through the front door and heard her calling from her office. She was sitting at her computer, looking worried. Connor, you need to see this, she said, motioning for me to sit down next to her. What is it? I asked. My heart was racing. Doug had been acting secretive for the past few days. I'd noticed him minimizing things on his computer when I walked by, and he'd been leaving the room to take phone calls. I was almost sure he'd spoken with Chloe yesterday. I finally got a chance to check his computer while he was out. Tiffany clicked on the browser and brought up his search history. My stomach dropped as I saw what was there. Searches about how to beat a lie detector test. Tiffany and I looked through the pages Doug had visited. He'd been looking up ways to manipulate the test results. We sat in silence for a while, processing what this meant. After a moment, we moved to the living room to discuss the implications. Our conversation was interrupted when we heard Doug's car pull into the driveway. He walked in and greeted us cautiously. His expression was weary as he sat on the couch across from us. I noticed Doug was walking with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. I realized then that this was all the confirmation I needed. Doug, I'm sure you passed the test with flying colors, I remarked sarcastically, watching his reaction. Honestly, I had a hunch that nothing happened. That day, I'd had a feeling in my gut. I hadn't shared my plan with her yet. I saw Tiffany shoot me a confused glance. I hadn't told her yet. If you promise that you and Chloe will never pull another stunt like this time, I was willing to let it go. I suggested we shake hands and forget about it. I also suggested we skip reading the report entirely. I could see relief wash over Doug's face as he quickly agreed, offering a smile. I stood up and moved closer, extending my hand as if to seal the deal, but before he could react, I pressed my foot down hard on his right leg. The expected discomfort didn't register at first. His face went white as he let out a scream. He collapsed back onto the couch in a panic and used both hands to pry his foot free from under mine, eventually tearing off his shoe. Tiffany and I watched in silence as the shoe came off, revealing a blood-soaked sock. He groaned in pain, and I caught Tiffany's horrified look as she processed what was happening. The blood stain on the carpet made her think, and I kept my gaze on Tiffany, noticing her realization and the connection she was making between the earlier search history and what had just happened. I don't need the report to know that Doug's excuse is a lie, I said, my voice cold. Did you really try nailing your shoe to the floor during the test, thinking it would help you beat it? It had to backfire eventually, right? You were trying to fool the system by raising your heart rate with harmless questions. Doug's expression shifted from pain to despair as he looked between me and Tiffany. Yeah, he admitted. I did cheat, and I showed Chloe how to do it too, but it wasn't for the reason you're thinking, I told Tiffany. I should have thought to say that earlier. Doug was applying pressure to his foot to stop the bleeding. Tiffany's disapproving glare at the mess on the floor said everything I briefly considered making Doug clean it up, but I held my tongue. We didn't know what questions you'd ask. Doug explained that we figured you'd ask if we had slept together. We would have aced that one. But we were worried you'd ask something more subtle, like what I pressed, whether our conduct always aligns with what's expected in a marriage. Doug, wait. But before he could finish, Tiffany cut him off. If you went to the trouble of nailing your shoe, it's obvious you've been up to no good, he said quietly. I didn't want to lose you. So when and what exactly happened that wouldn't measure up to the standards of a marriage? Tiffany asked. It was that day we were upstairs. We didn't actually do anything. We were just jumping on the bed and making it creak. We were fully clothed, Doug clarified quickly. We started touching each other through our clothes, he added. It was stupid, he continued. I sat there feeling a strange mix of. I felt a rush of emotions. It didn't seem like a lie, and while it felt foolish, it also rang true. I glanced at Tiffany. "Does this satisfy you?" I asked, not even close. She snapped. "This kind of scheming makes it hard to trust anything." Doug sat there silently, clearly knowing his marriage was hanging by a thread. Then out of nowhere, he blurted, "I have a video." Tiffany and I both said, "What?" in unison. Our voices matched in shock. "I set up a camera in our bedroom that day. I have everything was on tape." Doug confessed, "But why didn't you mention this earlier?" I demanded to know why, but I knew why. If the video showed them fooling around, even fully clothed, it was still something that could shatter any chance of reconciliation for me. The boundaries of infidelity go far beyond physical acts. Even a kiss would have been too much. "I was going to show you, but Chloe didn't want me to." Doug admitted she was scared. I couldn't resist sending Chloe a message right then, telling her to remove the nail from her shoe and come over to Tiffany's house. Doug was going to show us a video. It normally takes a minute to walk from Sylvia's house to ours, but it took Chloe a good 35 minutes to arrive after she received my message. When she finally knocked on the door, her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red from crying. Sylvia explained that Chloe had panicked after. Chloe tried to hug me, but I gently guided her to sit beside me on the couch. She kept glancing at me as if trying to read my thoughts. Meanwhile, Tiffany and I discussed the likely outcomes if the video confirmed Doug's claim. Tiffany had already decided that she might forgive Doug for what happened in the bedroom, though she'd make him sweat for a while. I was more conflicted. I'd been married to my wife for 24 years, and our kids had made it clear they'd be devastated if I didn't forgive her. But my emotional reaction kept telling me she had betrayed me, which I always thought was unforgivable. A minute later, Doug arrived with his laptop. He plugged it into the TV, muttering another apology before hitting play. Chloe avoided looking at anyone, especially me. She knew full well how I felt about fidelity, and this was a deeply uncomfortable moment for her. Sylvia watched the screen closely, seemingly unaware of what was about to unfold. Doug, on the other hand, appeared more at ease as he settled beside Tiffany, even attempting to hold her hand, but she withdrew it immediately. The video, which lasted about 10 minutes, played out exactly as Doug had described. As I mentioned earlier, it was nothing too erotic, just two people playing a fool's game. As soon as the clip started, it was clear that both of them were fully clothed, just as Doug had said. Chloe climbed on top of him, flipping him onto his back. I replayed the scene. What struck me most was, it seemed like Doug was the one who initiated the contact, although Chloe didn't hold back either. Watching this was pretty painful for a few reasons. Apart from a few exceptions, no man wants to see his wife with another man like this. But it also brought back the same painful feelings I had experienced the night I was stuck in that basement, reliving those sounds that had broken my heart. I felt the pain in my wrists again, a stark reminder of my helplessness. Halfway through the clip, I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sounds and images. I didn't open them again until the room was suddenly silent. The scene on screen had ended with Chloe and Doug separating quickly. The video paused on an empty bed before fading to black. There was an awkward, tense silence in the room. Sylvia looked at Chloe with disgust, while Doug's expression turned hopeful as he glanced toward Tiffany. But Chloe didn't look up. She was staring at a spot on the carpet and refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The silence was suddenly broken when Tiffany suddenly stood up, and her face was twisted in fury. Doug quickly followed, trying to gauge what would happen next. "You deceitful traitor," Tiffany's voice cut through. The tension was palpable. I'd never heard her so angry. This was far worse than any curse I'd heard from her before. Doug flinched, his face betraying his shock at her outburst. Then, without warning, Tiffany's hand struck his cheek with a loud, sharp crack. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I've never seen someone so I was furious, watching as Tiffany sat down, her face red with anger. Doug recoiled, narrowly dodging another slap as he stumbled backward, favoring his right leg. This whole video is why Doug insisted on recovering. Why would I do this? We were planning to have Connor and Chloe over that evening. We were going to sit out on the patio. Remember? Doug's voice was shaky, but Tiffany wasn't buying it. "That's not what happened, and you know it." Tiffany growled. "Do you remember why we didn't go outside? It was raining, so why is the sunlight streaming through the window in this video? This window doesn't get direct sunlight until noon." I could see the confusion on Doug's face turn to pure horror. That's when I realized they had tampered with the video. My mind was racing as I processed it all, going from considering forgiveness to a firm decision in an instant. Chloe let out a groan, turned and rushed out the door while Sylvia sat frozen. Tiffany was shocked by what was happening. She came towards Doug, who tried to get around me to avoid her. I stepped forward and hit him hard on the injured leg. He doubled over in pain, and as his head lowered, I kicked him in the face. He went back with a thud and blood poured from his nose. Doug scrambled to his feet and ran after Chloe, leaving the rest of us in a grim silence. Tiffany stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. I could feel her heart break deeply. She had loved Doug for nearly 25 years. It was hard to believe that this was the same man who had kept her hopeful through tough times. It was a tough time. I gave Tiffany a hug as she was really upset. I could relate to her pain. My own marriage was falling apart, but I preferred to grieve in private, saving my pain for later. At that moment, I stayed calm and thought about the questions I needed to ask. I had to make some decisions. My only regret was that I had let Doug walk away with nothing more than a broken nose. Sylvia was sitting nearby, seemingly too stunned to speak. I wasn't sure if she stayed out of guilt for her sister's actions, or because she couldn't tear herself away from the wreckage of our lives. I had no idea what to do. I'd decided to end my connection with Tiffany, so I let my thoughts wander. It became clear to me that while Doug was manipulative, he wasn't as clever as he thought. If Tiffany hadn't noticed the sunlight clue, we might have continued living a lie. In hindsight, the doctor video was a smart move on Doug's part, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being deceived. The words and sounds from the video matched what I had heard that night in the basement perfectly. I was left wondering how they had managed to sync everything so precisely. The answer was obvious. They had either overlaid the original audio onto new footage, or recreated the I suddenly understood why Doug had decided to play the video through his laptop. After giving Tiffany one last hug, I sat her down on the couch and went over to my own laptop. I was relieved to find that it hadn't gone into sleep mode, saving me from having to log back in. It was a silly thought. If I'd had the flash drive, I could have just used it on another device. But my mind was all over the place after everything that had happened that day. I quickly closed the playback software and opened the folder with the files we just watched. There were 8 videos in total, and the one I'd just seen, the video of Doug and Tiffany making love. There were 2 other files that caught my attention. One was titled Me and Chloe Original, and the other was labeled Basement AED. I clicked on the second file and skipped ahead until I found myself handcuffed in the basement, captured by a hidden camera. I closed the clip, unable to bear reliving that moment. That moment, the original file was much larger than the others, so I clicked on it. Tiffany gave me a nod of approval as I hit play. The video began in Doug and Tiffany's bedroom, but from a different angle than the one we had seen in the other clips. I hurried down the hallway to compare the camera positions after a quick inspection. I quickly inspected the footage and noticed that the original video had been captured by a hidden camera on the bookshelf, while the newer clips had been filmed with a tripod at the foot of the bed. I returned to the living room and saw that the video timer read 1 minute and 5 seconds with over an hour left. It was clear that Doug hadn't edited the footage very well. I fast-forwarded to 20 minutes before the end and watched the action unfold, pausing every 30 seconds until it began to mirror what I had seen earlier. I sat back down beside Tiffany, gripping her hand for support. The original video was vastly different from the version Doug had. I tried to pass off the only thing that remained the same as Chloe pushing Doug onto his back. About 25 seconds later, I heard both Tiffany and Sylvia gasp. The camera angle was low, showing Chloe's face as she turned her head to the side. That's when I realized what had caused the gasps. There was a vent at floor level that opened into a channel carrying the sounds from the room down to the basement where I had been trapped. Chloe knew exactly what I was hearing that night, and she'd enjoyed every moment of it, knowing full well what she was doing to me. My supposedly loving wife had taken pleasure in tormenting me. I was at a loss. I felt sick when Doug noticed where Chloe was looking at the screen. He smirked, too stunned to check the time. But a few seconds passed as we all watched him turn Chloe onto her back, kneeling beside her as he fumbled with his belt and trousers. On the screen, Chloe lifted her skirt and He took off her underwear and tossed them aside. The rest of the video played out almost exactly as I had imagined during my time handcuffed in the basement. With the benefit of hindsight, it was clear that Chloe's cruel enjoyment of the situation had likely emboldened Doug, setting off the chain of events that followed. I bet this was their first encounter. It seemed like it spiraled out of control. Doug probably realized he got some twisted pleasure out of humiliating someone. Chloe must have discovered a hidden part of herself that day. The video ended, and Sylvia turned to me with a solemn look. She seemed to be searching for something. She asked if there was any future for me and Chloe. Her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I paused, sorting through my emotions. No, not in this lifetime, I replied, my voice heavy with finality. If it had just been a joke like in the original video, I might have been able to forgive her, but they went on to rewrite history to fool the lie detector. That level of deceit is something I never thought she was capable of. It makes me question everything. What else has she lied about? We haven't even seen all the workouts. I'm not sure how many times she went back for more with Doug, but it was a lot. I glanced at Sylvia, who was clearly upset. I'm sure you noticed that look on her face. Sylvia, that's something I can't unsee. It's over between us. Sylvia nodded, her face a mask of sadness. Please, Connor, don't shame her publicly. It would only embarrass your kids, she said. If you give me a copy of the video, I'll explain everything to her parents and even your children if I have to. I agreed, thanking her for her understanding. Sylvia left quietly, but with a determined expression on her face. Tiffany, meanwhile, had already flipped open the phone book to the legal section, ready to move forward over the next few weeks. Tiffany and I provided comfort to each other, but it soon became clear that painful memories were too intertwined in our connection. We parted as friends, realizing that any romantic relationship would one night after another long evening of supporting each other. I left Tiffany's house only to find Doug waiting in her front yard. He was furious that I was visiting her so frequently, and that I was preventing him from reconciling with Tiffany. I was really pleased with myself. I'd broken his nose for a second time. I remembered that smug grin he'd flashed just before destroying my marriage. It was enough for me. Doug didn't play a part in the divorce proceedings. Well, it seems that either Tiffany tore him apart when he tried to demand his share of the assets, and I fully supported her, or she even threatened to press charges for unlawful restraint using the basement video as evidence. Doug, realizing he was cornered, cut his losses and disappeared. I might have been bluffing, and I wasn't too concerned about the public humiliation. However, I didn't want to cause embarrassment for my children or for Chloe's extended family. Not long after I gave Doug a second bloody nose, Chloe reached out to me. It had been about a week since the video incident. Her message was short and sweet. She seemed to think that Doug wouldn't have been careless enough to keep all the incriminating evidence in one place. The message hinted at her hope that I wouldn't share it with our family and friends. The video with our family and friends there might still be a chance for us in the future. The message also reminded me that I hadn't sent the clips to Sylvia yet. I hadn't heard from my kids that week, but that didn't surprise me too much. Teenagers are often absorbed in their own worlds. It seemed like Sylvia and Chloe hadn't been in touch either, possibly because of Sylvia's anger or Chloe's embarrassment. I gave Sylvia a call to check if she still wanted the video, and it turned out that she did. That's when I found out that Chloe had moved back in with her. I realized I hadn't actually watched takes 2 through 7, so I did what I saw and got rid of any softness I might have had for Chloe. They didn't just lose control during those workout sessions. They loved it, as you can see from their faces. Those clips matched the one Chloe wore in the original video. I almost reconsidered and thought about sending the videos to everyone in Chloe's address book, but I stopped myself. I had to think of my kids in the end. I couldn't find Doug, he'd already skipped town. As for Chloe, forgiveness wasn't an option, and unfortunately Doug wouldn't be getting a third broken nose. I sent all the clips to Sylvia with a warning that if I heard any complaints about how I treated Chloe, I'd release the entire video. Sylvia must have done a good job because one by one, Chloe's Liam and Lucia, Chloe's parents, called me to say they understood why the marriage was over. I later found out Sylvia had explained everything to them, and even offered to show the clips as proof. Only Chloe's mother took her up on the offer, and she apparently became ill halfway through watching the original video. After that, Chloe didn't contest the divorce. Sylvia told me she had moved out of her parents' house and rented a small apartment to escape the toxic environment. I wasn't trying to cheat her in the divorce. 24 years together had to count for something, and it did. I don't want my kids to resent me if they ever forgive her. Chloe eventually sent me a heartfelt letter apologizing for her actions and the cover-up. She described the loneliness she felt and begged for forgiveness. Not necessarily to get back together, but to find peace with herself. She pleaded for me to forgive her for the sake of her parents, our children, and our mutual friends. Her words almost moved me to tears. I wasn't looking for a replacement right away, but there was no shortage of single women vying for my attention. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of decent, morally sound men, and you'll get a bleak picture. I'm looking forward to meeting new women, and since I have no intention of marrying again, I expect there will be many such encounters in my future. If you ask an older woman about the availability of decent, morally sound men, she'll probably tell you there aren't many. I'm looking forward to meeting new women. Since I don't intend to marry again, I expect there will be many such encounters in my future.